The story starts with an old couple, Shi and, taking care of their apple orchard. Shi feels bad that he couldn't give a proper honeymoon when they were young because they didn't have much money, and tells him she's happy with the life they've built together. As they talk, Shi remembers the apple tree they planted when they got married 60 years ago. He finds the tree, which was damaged by a storm long ago but is still standing because he fixed it. While looking at the tree, and notices a shiny golden apple growing on it. They're both surprised. Later, when they return home, Shi feels guilty about not giving and the life he thinks she deserved. He remembers how much and sacrificed to stay by his side. Feeling emotional, Shi starts crying in the bathroom. Suddenly, he looks in the mirror and sees that he's young again. Excited and confused, Shi runs to and discovers that she has also become young. He can't wait to finally take her on the honeymoon they never had. The next day, their granddaughter, Mino, visits and is shocked to see how young her grandparents look. Once she gets over her surprise, she can't stop admiring how handsome her grandpa looks. Later, Mino tells her dad, Yoshiaki, but he doesn't believe her and thinks it's a joke. In the neighborhood, people talk about how they miss seeing the couple at the park because they had stopped going due to their age and health. Now, with their new youthful looks, Shi becomes popular with the older ladies, and catches the attention of the older men. In a flashback, Yoshiaki once tried to convince his parents to move in with him because they were getting old. But Shi refused, saying he wanted to stay on their family land, which had been passed down for generations. While this was happening, and was in the kitchen with her daughter-in-law, Kate. Kate asked if there was anything she wanted in life, and said she was happy as long as she had Shi. Back in the present, Kate visits the couple to deliver some ingredients and had asked for. She's shocked to see how young Shi looks. Shi tells her that and is at a community meeting and assumes Mino already told her about their transformation. Kate, still confused, excuses herself to the bathroom to process what she just saw. She then calls her husband, Yoshiaki, who comes over with Mino. When Yoshiaki sees his parents, he realizes Mino was telling the truth. He gets mad at Kate for not telling him right away, but she says she wanted to explain it in person. Meanwhile, everyone notices Mino clinging to her grandpa. Kate scolds Mino, but she tells she's the only one he loves, which makes her feel better, and lightly slaps Shi to show she's still a bit annoyed. After things calm down, Yoshiaki and his family prepare to leave because he has work, and pats Yoshiaki on the head, just like when he was a little boy, to remind him she's proud of him for working hard. Seeing this, Mino also asks for a head pat and gives her one too. Meanwhile, the elderly people in their town, Manami, are worried about the upcoming sports festival. Their school closed a while ago, and now there aren't any kids left in the area. Because of this, their team keeps losing to another neighborhood, Kitamachi, every year. Things got worse when one of their older players got sick during the festival, so most of them don't want to try anymore. But when they see Shi's new young muscles, they get an idea. They beg him to join their team and refuse to take no for an answer. Shi says he thought he was just going to a community meeting, but they insist he help them. On the day of the festival, Kitamachi's leader, Hawkyari, shows up and makes fun of the Manami team. Hawk hears a rumor that Manami might not join the festival this year because their team is made up of people over 50. Feeling confident, he shows off his grandsons, Masa Igarashi, a soccer star, and Dei Aijishi, the captain of the baseball team. Laughing, they joke about how easy it will be to win against older people. But Sono, Manami's leader, isn't worried. He tells Hawk that they have a secret weapon this time. Hawk laughs it off, thinking it's just a joke, until Shi and arrive, looking young and full of energy. Hawk is stunned and at first thinks they must be the couple's grandchildren. Shi corrects him, saying that he and have become young again. Both Hawk and his grandsons are speechless. The festival starts with a tug-of-war. Both teams pull hard, but things aren't looking good for Manami. One elder suggests and cheer them on to boost their spirits. Though shy, and cheers loudly, making everyone excited and motivated. With her encouragement, Shi and the team find their strength and win the first event. Shi praises Anne for her cheering, and she feels happy despite her earlier embarrassment. Next is the three-legged race, where pairs tie their feet together and run. Masa and Dei are sure they'll win because they've been playing sports together for years and know how to work as a team. The Manami elders start slowly, and one older pair apologizes for holding everyone up as they finish the course. This leaves space for Shi and to step in. At the front, Masa and Dei are almost at the finish line and think they've already won. But Shi and catch up, moving perfectly in sync thanks to their 70 years of marriage. They pass the brothers and win the race. Shi and Anne's teamwork helps Manami win every other event, leading to their overall victory. Hawk and his grandsons are upset and frustrated. Masa and Dei realize winning isn't as easy as they thought, and Hawk angrily mutters about how Shi has always taken things from him, even his grandson's happiness. Afterward, and apologizes to Hawk for getting too excited during the games. When Hawk asks where Shi is, and says he's busy celebrating their win with the crowd. to ease the tension, and offers food she brought and invites Hawk and his grandsons to eat with her. While eating, they talk about Hawk's late wife, who passed away 3 years ago, and mentions how Masa and Day remind her of Hawk when he was young. This leads her to recall how Hawk once confessed his feelings for her a long time ago. Masa and Day are shocked to learn their grandfather had a crush on And, which explains the tension between him and Shu, and encourages the boys to work harder for the next festival, saying losing is a chance to grow. The boys admire her wisdom and begin to understand why their grandfather liked her, which annoys Hawk even more. A week later, Hawk sends Masa to Shu and En's house with a small gift to thank En for her kindness. When Masa arrives, Mino greets him. He feels nervous because they are alone. Her family is out shopping. Masa and Mino used to be classmates. Mino was popular, while Masa had a hard time fitting in, so he's unsure how to talk to her. To avoid conversation, Masa starts looking at his phone. But Mino leans over to see what he's doing, making him even more nervous. Just then, Kate arrives with Shu and Kate panics when she sees her daughter alone with a boy. Shu also feels awkward and doesn't know how to step in. Finally, the adults join them, and Masa explains why he came to visit. Shu warmly welcomes Sha, but Kate and En quietly talk about whether Sha might be a good match for Mino. Hearing this, Shu jokingly asks Sha if he likes any girls, but En quickly scolds him for being nosy. When it's time for Sha to leave, Mino politely tells him he's welcome to visit again anytime. Her formal way of saying goodbye makes Kate and En laugh. They note that Mino and Sha don't seem very close yet. After Sha leaves, Mino quietly wishes she could have talked to him more. Sha hears this and smiles but doesn't say anything. Sha goes home and asks his grandfather if there's another errand he can run, hoping for an excuse to visit the couple's house again. The next day, Mino asks her grandparents how they fell in love, and says she was the one who confessed first. Shu explains that he was happy but told her they couldn't be together because his father had already arranged a marriage for him with another girl. Back then, parents had a lot of control over who their children married. Mino is upset to hear this and asks what happened next. Shu says he argued with his father and even thought about running away with En. But En solved the problem herself. She boldly talked to the girl she was supposed to marry and told her she wouldn't give up on the man she loved. Luckily, the girl secretly liked someone else, so she was happy to let Shu and be together. Mino is amazed by her grandmother's bravery and begs her to act out what she said back then, though shy at first, and agrees. Her dramatic performance makes both Mino and Shu proud and happy. Meanwhile, two boys walk through an apple orchard, talking about how farming is only for old people. They dream of moving to Tokyo to make money and find girlfriends. Suddenly, they see a beautiful young woman. Confused, they wonder if she's the daughter or granddaughter of the elderly couple who own the orchard. The woman greets them with a cheerful "good afternoon," leaving the boys embarrassed and running away. As they look back, they see the woman with a man loading apples into a truck. When she calls him "dear," the boys realize she's actually the elderly woman they knew, now young again. Inspired, they decide farming might not be so bad after all. In a flashback, En once asked Shu to throw out some flyers. Shu noticed a dress on one flyer that En liked, priced at 3,000 yen. Later, En found the dress at home and realized Shu had secretly bought it for her. Overjoyed, she hugged him, and Shu shyly admitted he couldn't resist. That evening, they prepared dinner together and watched a romantic movie with Mino. Shu complained that modern movie romances were too dramatic. To him, true love is about understanding each other. And, however, seemed interested in the movie's kissing scenes. When Shu teased her, she asked him to reenact one. They shared a sweet kiss, but En didn't feel the magic she'd expected. After 50 years together, their love was deeper than a simple kiss. Shu laughed and said, "I told you, this stuff is for young people," and smiled but secretly felt a bit embarrassed. One afternoon, an old friend of the couple, Mrs. Kaka, stopped by with a basket of mountain asparagus and other gifts. She chatted with Mino, but her thick accent made it hard for Mino to understand. En came to the rescue, warmly welcoming Kaka, who had just returned from the fish market. Kaka was surprised and asked why En seemed so lively. En smiled and said, "I've gotten a little younger." Kaka is amazed by En's youthful looks and jokes that En could marry her grandson. Laughing, En hugs Kaka and says she won't do that yet. Mino playfully adds that she wouldn't mind if it were with her grandfather. Later, their granddaughter, Shiori, shows up at their house after an argument with her father, Takahiro. She's glad to have a safe place to stay but is shocked by how young her grandmother looks. En offers her some food, but Shiori refuses, looking sad. She shares that bullying at school has crushed her confidence, and her father's strict demand for her to study medicine feels overwhelming. Shiori feels like she's lost everything, her dreams, her future, and even her bond with her dad. En gently comforts her, saying that her tears show she still cares and hasn't given up, and reminds Shiori of how she once dreamed of becoming a doctor to help people, even if her goals have changed, and assures her that she will always be loved as a granddaughter. Shiori starts crying, hugs and finally agrees to eat dinner. In a flashback, and apologizes to Shu for being too sick to go on a trip. Shu understands and tells her health comes first, and encourages him to take their son, Yoshiaki, to the beach, but Shu refuses, saying it wouldn't be the same without her, and jokes that he just wants to see her in a bikini and make other men jealous. Back in the present, and wonders if she should dress up for Shu. She knows he's a bit of a flirt but feels unsure about showing too much skin. Shiori encourages her, saying it's okay to look good for her husband, and hesitates but decides to think about it. Later, Shiori teases Shu, saying and is considering wearing a bikini. Shu laughs, admitting he planned that all along. Suddenly, the phone rings, and answers, thinking it's Yoshiaki, but the man on the line has a strange voice. He claims to be her son and says he needs 200,000 yen for an emergency, and pretends to believe him and writes down the bank details. Before hanging up, she calmly tells him she knows he's a scammer and should call someone who might actually care. The man hangs up immediately. The next day, and should see on the news that the scammer has been caught. She reminds and to be careful, but jokes that after 6 p.m., their phone line becomes a free-for-all. Later, Anne realizes her vision has improved and she doesn't need glasses anymore. She reads a newspaper aloud to prove it, impressing Mino. Shu walks in, and Mino jokingly asks Anne to read a sentence she points to, "Darling, you are charming." Mino laughs, teasing Anne for flirting with Shu. But soon, Anne should turn the tables, pressuring Mino to finish the sentence, "I like someone, and that person is." Embarrassed, Mino runs away, and even Shu feels bad for teasing her. One evening, Mino watches a romantic movie and asks Anne if she ever held hands with Shu when they were young. Anne says no, explaining it would have been too bold back then, like announcing you were dating. Shu jokes that holding hands now is just to stop them from falling over. Mino sighs, calling them unromantic. On a cold day, Anne and Shu return from the store, happy about finding Chinese cabbage. Anne notices Shu hasn't taken her hand, even though she isn't wearing a glove. Hoping he'll get the hint, she keeps her hand out, but Shu avoids it, determined not to let Mino call him romantic. Finally, Anne boldly grabs his hand herself, her heart racing. Later, Shu and explain their miraculous transformation to their second son, Takahiro. Though surprised, Takahiro confirms they're really his parents. Takahiro examines his parents carefully, noticing Anne's steady breathing and slower pulse, confirming they've truly grown younger. However, during a medical checkup, Anne receives devastating news: she has liver cancer. The doctors recommend more tests to determine the best treatment. Takahiro is crushed, remembering how he became a doctor to save his mother but feels like he hasn't done enough. Watching her health decline has always been hard, but her current condition fills him with guilt and a renewed determination. He recalls the promise he made as a child to become a doctor for her. In a flashback, as Shu and Anne raised their children, they grew even closer through their love for farming and simple living. One year, a typhoon broke their cherished apple tree in half. The couple worked tirelessly to save it, and eventually, the tree bore fruit again. One day, a perfect golden apple appeared on its branches. Shu admired its beauty and wanted to place it on their Shinto altar, but Anne argued that it should be enjoyed instead. They shared the apple, savoring its taste and the memories it carried. After eating the golden apple, Anne dreams of being in a strange place, facing a giant floating hourglass. It spins and restarts its countdown before suddenly falling toward her. She wakes up, realizing it was just a dream. When she tells Shu, he reveals he had the same dream, leaving them both puzzled. That day is their 58th wedding anniversary, and Anne suggests celebrating with cake. Shu pretends not to care, saying cake is for kids, but Anne knows he's bluffing. She opens the fridge to find a cake next to the red rice she prepared for dinner. Laughing, she throws the cake at Shu, teasing him for pretending not to care. Shu admits he only jokes like that with her because she's special. They enjoy their meal and share a moment of happiness together. After dinner, Shu reminisces about his past. He had to leave school after middle school to work on the farm. For a short time, he attended a women's school in Tokyo, but the war destroyed it. And shares her own struggles during those times in the countryside, explaining how meeting Shu made her life brighter. She reflects that while the city has many things, the countryside has its own special treasures, though she keeps the thought to herself. Later, Shiori brings a video game for Shu and Anne, saying it's good for keeping their minds sharp. Shu dislikes the idea of flashy screens and prefers card games, but they give it a try. They find themselves playing a game called Danger in the Rice Field 3, where they fight off zombies using chainsaws and shotguns. Anne calmly recites Buddhist chants while Shu nervously tries to survive. After clearing the game, they decide it's not for them and stop playing. The next day, Mino comes home and reunites with Shiori. She playfully teases her cousin, who tries to push her away but eventually gives in to a hug. Shiori and Mino attend the same school but rarely see each other. As kids, they were much closer, but now Shiori insists their bond is water under the bridge. Mino disagrees, especially when it comes to Shiori's love for their grandparents. Mino believes Shiori still cares deeply for them, despite her tough exterior. Shiori denies it, but their grandfather, Poru, overhears and mistakenly thinks Shiori doesn't like him. Shiori stubbornly refuses to explain herself but eventually clarifies that she didn't mean it that way. Although she doesn't openly admit her love, she asks him not to hate her. Poru softens, thanking her for being alive. Later, Shi has another strange dream. He finds himself facing the mysterious hourglass, which spins and resets its countdown before falling toward him. Shi reflects on how much he and An have enjoyed being young again, but he realizes there's still so much they haven't done, like the honeymoon they missed when they were younger. Now, with their youthful bodies, they can finally live out those dreams, savoring every moment while it lasts. One morning, Shi wakes up and notices he's no longer young. Though his joint pain hasn't returned, he worries and might prefer the younger version of him. And reassures him, saying her love isn't based on his age but on who he is. Shi realizes that thinking being old is bad dismisses the life they've shared together. He promises to fulfill their long-awaited honeymoon and embraces the idea that he's still too young at heart to give up on life. At the clinic, Takahiro examines his parents, puzzled by their condition. Shi may look older, but his muscles are still strong. However, his liver and kidneys show signs of aging, and Takahiro warns him not to overdo it. And, on the other hand, still has the health of a 20-year-old, but her slow aging makes Takahiro worry about how much time she has left. And doesn't fear death but worries she might outlive Shi and end up alone. Later, Shi tells the family about his aging. To prove his strength, he arm wrestles his son, Yasaki. Confident in his abilities, Shi easily wins the match. Yasaki promises to book a fancy room with an outdoor bath for his parents, inspiring Shi to dream about enjoying the bath with An. During a trip to the home improvement store, Shi feels self-conscious about the age difference between him and An. He suggests they pretend not to be married in public. When a clerk assumes Shi is buying a gift for his granddaughter, he doesn't correct him. However, An steps in, proudly declaring that she is Shi's wife. On their way home, An makes it clear she won't hide their marriage, no matter what others think. Shi notices that An has stopped eating her favorite treat, daifuku, around him. When he asks why, she says she's not hungry, but later that night, he catches her eating it in secret. She admits she didn't want to tempt him since his health might not handle the sweets as well as hers. Shi reassures her, saying seeing her happy is enough for him. They agree to enjoy the treat together, guilt-free. Years ago, after An's parents passed away, she lived with relatives who looked down on her family. They spoke an old dialect of Japanese, which made her feel even more isolated. After working in the fields, she often visited a Shinto shrine to find some peace. One day, she met Shu, who was picking apples nearby. He noticed she was hungry and offered her some rice, not caring about her background, and appreciated his kindness, and soon she began visiting her house often, using the shrine as an excuse. At first, An felt uneasy, worried about what others might think, but as time passed, she grew fond of him. One night, Shi had the hard glass dream again. In the dream, he turned the hourglass back and regained his youth. However, instead of celebrating, he only asked An to fix his messy hair. This experience led to a heartfelt conversation between them about growing old and what the future holds. An believed their youth wouldn't last forever, but Shi reassured her, saying eternity didn't matter as long as they had each other. Shi only wanted to stay by An's side for as long as they had together. The next day, passing an apple farm, a young woman there warned them about agrochemicals, which they thanked her for. Meanwhile, Shi's grandson, Shoyuta, reluctantly helped his grandfather Igarashi in the warehouse. Igarashi showed him old items like folding tables and war fans, explaining that they might become irrelevant to younger generations. However, Shoyuta was drawn to a black box, which she revealed might have been part of An's dowry. The memory moved Igarashi, and he asked for some time alone. Later, Shoyuta contacted the education secretary, hoping to preserve his grandfather's collection. Shi and Igarashi also discussed the future of the farm. With Igarashi's children having moved to the city, there was no one to take over, and the farm faced possible demolition. During a break, Shi asked Shoyuta if he'd ever consider staying in the countryside. But Shoyuta had dreams of moving to Tokyo to pursue soccer, even though he respected his grandfather's legacy. When Shoyuta overheard their conversation, he reassured Igarashi that the land had shaped him. Turning his back on his hometown felt wrong, and even if he became a soccer player, he dreamed of one day reviving the farm. Igarashi was deeply touched and decided to cancel the demolition, realizing how special his grandson was. Elsewhere, Mino, Shi's granddaughter, spent her day off at the university library studying for exams but struggled to focus. She felt guilty after jokingly telling her grandfather he could be her teacher since he hadn't finished high school. While at the library, she noticed Shu but tried to avoid him. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she saw he was reading high school textbooks. This reminded her of his unfinished education, and she felt conflicted, disliking lectures from adults about studying. Later, she thanked Shu for encouraging her, which helped her do well on her midterms. At school, classmates gossiped about a striking white-haired couple in Mamachi. Mino played it cool but couldn't hide her recent habit of coming home early. One day, at an ice cream shop with Shoyuta, Mino asked if he ever thought about marriage. Shoyuta admired their grandparents' bond and admitted it would be nice to have a relationship like theirs someday. Mino confessed she'd been thinking about marriage too, making the conversation awkward. Shoyuta quickly excused himself, and Mino reflected on how much her grandfather admired Shoyuta. Later, Mino excitedly told about her school's cultural festival, where her class would run a cafe, and wanted to attend with Shu, but he initially declined, thinking he'd be busy with farm work and a checkup. Mino suggested and go alone, but she refused to leave Shu behind. After double-checking the calendar, Shu realized he was free and offered to join and making her happy. On the day of the festival, Shu recalled the last time he'd been at a school, during a typhoon evacuation, and was thrilled about the event, but a group of kids selling food accidentally spilled juice on her blouse. A girl from the fashion club offered to lend and some clothes. When they reached the sewing room, the students were amazed at how perfectly the outfit fit Anne. As Shu waited outside, he thought about the marriage proposals he had once received from influential families, but none of them compared to Anne inside. Someone asked Anne about her time at women's college. She shared how much she loved music, often playing the koto and piano, something Shu wished he could have seen. Soon, one of the students called Shu into the room, and surprised him by wearing a school uniform. She looked like the young girl he had first fallen for, even speaking in her old accent. Playfully, Shu asked if she had a crush on anyone, and Anne laughed, admitting she wasn't good at keeping up the act. It reminded her of the same question Shu had once asked her, which had made him jealous back then too. As they talked, some students hesitated to enter the room, unsure who should go in first. Shu and opened the door easily and moved on to check out Mino's cafe. Mino, dressed stylishly, was serving customers. A colleague mistook Shu for her boyfriend, but neither Shu nor Anne cared about the mix-up. Unfortunately, Mino's cafe was almost empty. Shoyuta explained that the class next door had set up a ramen shop, stealing most of the customers. Jokingly, Mino and Shoyuta said they needed someone to attract more girls to their cafe, and encouraged Shu to step in. Before long, elderly women flocked to the cafe, charmed by Shu calling them madam. Room 2 became lively, and Mino's team had success with one order after another. Later, Anne found an old photo from Kinami High School's history and noticed Shu wasn't in it. She felt sorry for him, assuming he hadn't been able to stay in school long enough to be part of it. Realizing her mistake, she apologized. Shu explained that his father couldn't afford to keep him in school, and as the eldest son, he had to work on the family farm. Shu admitted that he used to wish he'd finished school, but now he was glad he didn't, because it meant he met Anne. He pointed out that the photo was taken at an old Shinto shrine, where he had spent time with her instead, and wanted to share her feelings, but a group of kids filming them interrupted the moment. Later, Shu noticed Mino looked sad because no one had asked her to dance at the bonfire. Feeling shy himself, Shu stepped aside to give the younger boy a chance to invite her, and wished she could watch Mino dance, but Shu thought the kids should enjoy their time together. That night, Anne dreamed of her younger days, imagining herself back in her school uniform. The next morning, Shu and Anne needed to appear as their original selves for paperwork, and tried using the hard glass to turn them back but accidentally broke it. When Shu woke up, he was an old man again, but Anne had become a younger version of herself, complete with black hair, and was amazed by modern technology. She stared at the moving pictures on the TV and the stove that lit up with the press of a button. She introduced herself as Anasaki, unsure if she should trust Shu, but seeing their matching wedding rings made her believe he was telling the truth. She wondered why she had spent 50 years with him and asked him to make her fall in love with him again. Shu suggested they start with a good meal, and was skeptical of the electric rice cooker but changed her mind after tasting the rice. While washing dishes, she noticed Shu helping with housework, something men didn't do in her time. Shu explained that he didn't want to be like his father, who had controlled everything at home. Though Shu wasn't good at cooking, he made sure to take care of other chores and balance the workload with Anne and was impressed. But to Shu, it was just natural. They had always supported each other. From the start of their relationship, Shu and Anne had always shared responsibilities. Shu never complained, and together they made their home a happy one. One day, Anne found an old roll of film in the house. That night, Shu explained that their strange time-traveling experiences were connected to something called a hard glass, which appeared in their dreams. He assured her that when she fell asleep, everything would make sense. The next morning, Shu was young again, leaving and shocked. However, she couldn't remember anything about the hard glass or recognize Shu's younger face and voice. Seeing his sadness, Anne wished she could share his pain. Later, Shu showed Anne a photo of their son Yasaki and his family. He proudly talked about their kind and caring children. and felt emotional but worried about how to explain her memory loss to them. When Yasaki's family arrived, and had forgotten they were visiting, Mino, her granddaughter, asked to play with Grandpa. And, not wanting to upset anyone, agreed to act as Shu's wife, asking him to cover for her memory lapses and unusual accent. Anne's black hair caught Mino's attention. Mino asked about her father's health, and Shu reassured her everything was fine. When Anne accidentally used modern slang, Mino found it amusing. Shu quickly explained that Anne had picked it up at a recent cultural festival. Mino thought it was cool, and Anne hugged her awkwardly, noticing how kind her granddaughter was. During dinner preparation, Shu taught Anne how to make curry rice. Anne struggled to chop vegetables and admitted she never learned to cook because her family had servants. Embarrassed, she wondered if Shu was laughing at her. Instead, Shu patiently taught her, teasing her playfully, and felt nostalgic as she remembered cooking before her memory loss. When Mino noticed the potato pieces were unusually large, Shu dismissed it as her imagination. In truth, Anne had been using the peeler incorrectly. A flashback showed Yasaki as a child excitedly sharing his top score on a test, with Anne celebrating his achievement. As he grew older, Yasaki faced the harsh realities of the job market. One day, he told his parents that the company he worked for was on the brink of bankruptcy because of declining local business. Shu suggested Yasaki work at the orchard, but Yasaki refused, not wanting to burden his parents. Instead, he vowed to work harder to improve the situation. Sensing his struggle, Anne gently held his hand, telling him it was okay to take a step back and rest. She reminded him that while his superiors benefited from his hard work, he was left to carry all the blame, and assured Yasaki that his parents would always be there for him. Her comforting words moved him, and he opened up about his frustrations. However, he couldn't help but notice something different about his mother. Anne stroked his head and reassured him, reminding him that she was still the same person who loved him. The next day, she took Anne to the spot where she had confessed her love to him years ago, hoping it would spark her memory. Anne didn't recall anything special about the place. She suggested they reenact the moment, but halfway through she laughed and said it felt too silly. They returned home in awkward silence after a small argument. Later, Anne visited her older sister, who now suffered from memory loss and no longer recognized her. Seeing her sister in such a state weighed heavily on Anne. She felt the cruel passage of time and the pain of watching someone who once comforted her become so distant. Despite everything, Shu has always quietly supported Anne. She feels his presence and moves closer to him, even though he's only heading to the bathroom. During the visit, Anne's sister, Mrs. Tsuru, sits by the piano but no longer plays. Anne decides to play, hoping it will bring back some of Tsuru's memories of being an amazing pianist. Anne recalls how Tsuru used to play alongside her when she sang, no matter the song. Even though Tsuru doesn't remember much anymore, including and the music brings a spark back to her eyes. Surprised, Anne watches as Tsuru presses a piano key with her thumb and begins playing along, just like the old days. Tsuru sings a song about still dreaming of the past, and though she doesn't recognize Anne, she praises her playing. Anne feels deeply moved and sheds tears, happy to see her sister enjoying the moment, even if it's just for a short while. Weeks go by, but Anne's memory still hasn't returned. This is the first time she's alone while Shu is at a meeting. She feels distant from him, not remembering when or why she fell in love with him. Yet, she also realizes that whenever Shu isn't around, she feels uneasy. Even though she should be able to manage by herself, she finds herself missing him and wishing for his calming presence. Then, she recalls Shu's promise that he would never leave her. She remembers confessing her love to him at 16, meant as a joke, but he started visiting her at the shrine every day. Her family didn't approve of Shu, and they forbade her from seeing him. After a long separation, Shu came to her house one rainy night, asking to be in a relationship. He had a bruise from fighting with his father. A few days later, Anne got very sick and Shu took care of her, paying for her treatment. Anne once thought their relationship only brought bad luck, but Shu didn't care about the difficulties, they would always love each other. When Shu returns home from his meeting, Anne eagerly greets him. As her hair turns white, she regrets the harsh words she said and realizes her life has always been linked to Shu. The next day, Anne feels like herself again, wondering how Shu could be so patient with everything. Shu replies that both her past and present self are equally important to him. Holding her hand, he says he takes responsibility for their journey, both now and before. Together, they start planning their long-awaited honeymoon. They dream of stopping in Tokyo on their way to Atami, maybe even visiting a casino to play cards and drink sake. But to do so, they would need to catch the overnight train, which Shota warns could be difficult since the bullet train now takes just 3 hours to get to Atami. And is amazed, remembering it used to take 8 hours on the old train. Shota is also worried about how well Mino can help her grandparents, but Mino reassures him, saying her involvement with the Tokyo football team already helps a lot. Shota is still concerned about the elderly couple causing trouble, though. Meanwhile, Shu insists that, according to tradition, he will travel to Tokyo with a watermelon on his head. He asks if Mino's grandparents know anyone in the Kanta area, and the grandfather explains that their daughter and her husband live there but are likely too busy to help. He wonders if having someone guide them in Tokyo would be useful. Everyone looks at Shu, unsure how he'll respond. Mino offers to go too if Shu agrees, which makes her grandmother happy, thinking it would be nice to spend the honeymoon with her grandchildren. Shu, frustrated, yells at everyone to calm down, saying he's not their grandchild. Shu's grandfather, Shuzu, cleverly suggests this could be a good chance for Shu to meet Mino in Tokyo. However, Shu still needs his grandfather's approval. When Shu asks for permission, the old man angrily refuses without hesitation. Mino uses her charm to convince him that Shu is in the same class as her and would be helpful in guiding her grandparents. After some convincing, the old man finally agrees, excited to have Mino bring up brides home. The younger ones try to explain they're just friends, but the old man won't listen. Meanwhile, Anne visits Mrs. Catshaw, who owns a struggling shop. Anne notices how quiet it is, and Mrs. Catshaw worries her shop might close soon. Anne talks about being afraid that time is passing too quickly and wanting to fight against it. Later, Anne is outside eating sweet potatoes, and her beauty catches the attention of the crowd, creating a stir. A's presence turns into free advertising for Mrs. Catch's shop. 60 years ago, at Allure Station, Shu had said goodbye to a friend leaving for Tokyo, hoping to make a life in the big city. Though Shu never thought Tokyo was for him, he secretly longed for a chance there. Years later, as Shu is lost in this memory, and brings him back to reality, reminding him to get on the train. Before boarding, Yasi wishes Shu a safe trip but warns that if anything happens to his daughter, there will be consequences. And asks Shu if he's ever been to Tokyo, and he lies, saying he's never left the prefecture. He claims his health is getting worse because of her, but reassures her not to feel guilty. And is confused by the younger and older versions of Shu and urges him to leave. The grandchildren convince the elders to join them on the trip. At the start of the journey, Anne is surprised by how fast the train is going and asks how fast it's traveling. Shu says it's 186 miles per hour, and Anne worries they'll miss Mount Fuji. Shu explains they should be on a different line to see the sights. Mino then asks why the grandparents look so old, and they explain they're using the senior discount, so it would look odd if they appeared younger. The train announces the next stop at Sendai Station, and the grandparents take a nap, telling the grandchildren not to wake them up even if the train derails. When they arrive in Tokyo, Shu and revert to their younger selves to enjoy the moment. Their first stop is Mosher, where Aimi lives. Sadly, Aimi is too sick to enjoy her mother's visit, but she remembers how her mother used to care for her when she was younger. Aimi feels a hand on her forehead, thinking it's a hallucination, but it's appearing as she did when Aimi was a child. It takes a while for Aimi to understand, but eventually she does. Later, Shu and Anne comment on how different Tokyo feels. Some schoolgirls in Asakusa even ask to take a picture with them. Mino then talks about Aimi's family. Aimi's aunt and her husband have a large family, with grown children who now have kids of their own. One of them, Kosu, is a great-grandson. When Kosu meets his great-grandfather, he thinks Shu is his fake dad because they look so alike. The boy has fun with the resemblance. The next day, after explaining everything to Aimi's family, Mino and Shu visit Shinjuku. Meanwhile, the honeymoon couple explores Sugo Shopping Street, amazed by the unique products like Buddhist items and Chinese medicine. Shu stops by a specialty store while and takes a walk. The shopkeeper thinks Shu is buying something for his grandfather, but he's actually shopping for himself. And thought she was just window shopping but ends up with bags full of purchases. When they return to the store, and find Shu surrounded by a crowd of elderly ladies who think he's a handsome gentleman. As a result, Shu buys a haramaki, a traditional garment, to wear under his clothes. Later, Anne is surprised when she has reserved 2 seats at a restaurant for a special treat, a parfait. She's shocked at how expensive it is but doesn't want to worry him. Still, she feels guilty about eating something so luxurious, so she only has 1 strawberry. However, after tasting it, she can't resist and ends up devouring the parfait. The couple then goes to a game center and takes photos as keepsakes, but they end up looking like ID pictures. Mino decides to teach them how to take better photos, showing them different poses and styles. Shu and try again, this time loosening up and drawing their pictures. When they show them to the others, the photos turn out to be cheesy and tacky. Finally, they take a group photo together. When they return to Aimi's house, Shu promises his great-grandson a spinning top. The boy gets excited but then disappointed when he sees the toy. Shunik, Aimi's youngest son, explains that the boy wanted a top with a ball-bearing blade to beat the other tops. Shu looks at the new tops and thinks they'll make for a fair match. He challenges his great-grandson to a duel. If the boy wins, Shu will give him a new toy. The battle begins, and when Kasu launches his Beyblade, Shu spins an old top with all his strength, creating a whirlwind-like spin. Kasu loses, but Shu buys him a new toy to make up for it. Both of them are exhausted after the match and take a nap in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Aimi's daughter talks to her mother, worried she might feel abandoned after she got married. In Manichi, a girl goes to her grandparents' house but remembers they're traveling. She finds a hidden key in the backyard and enters the house, filled with memories of her grandparents. She came to study in peace, but now she's afraid of losing them, realizing she'll soon have her own family and won't depend on anyone. She wishes her grandparents would return soon. At the same time, Shu and experience a strange lightning strike. Later, a representative from Ganu Productions approaches the couple and tries to scare him off, while Shu gets angry. The man explains that Shu's tall and handsome face would make him perfect for a magazine cover, and gets upset, saying it's inappropriate to ask her husband to show off for all the women in the country in front of her. When they meet Shoyuta again, they explain that they managed to send the man away by telling him they are actually in their 80s, whether he believes it or not. The man leaves quietly. The family finally arrives at Atami, and both Shu and can't hold back their tears for fulfilling a long-held dream. Their first stop is the Isumo Inn, where everyone is amazed by the sights. Shu is immediately interested in the outdoor bath, but insists that Shoyuta shares the room with her. Later, Shu continues to push for the outdoor bath, but scolds him because the children need to sleep first. The family is amazed by the large meal set before them, and Shu is deeply touched by the abundance of food. Since this doesn't happen often, and offers Shu a drink, which he accepts, apologizing to his liver before drinking it. Meanwhile, Shoyuta feels unworthy of such luxury. Mino expresses her happiness about having Shoyuta with her on the trip. She admits that without him, she wouldn't have made it to Shinjuku, as she would have been scared to go alone. Later, Shu encourages everyone to take 3 consecutive sips of their drinks, even if it's just juice. He says they'll understand why later. When it's time to sleep, Mino says goodnight to Shoyuta, who is shocked to realize he's sleeping in the same room as the girl he likes. Earlier, their granddaughter said it would be strange for her grandparents to sleep separately on their honeymoon, so she arranged for Shoyuta to sleep with Mino. To his surprise, Mino tells him to keep it a secret, or her father will be upset. The girl thought her grandparents would be cuddling, but instead, Shu falls asleep quickly. Shoyuta remembers how the couple acted like newlyweds, with Shu trying to hold A's hand but stopping halfway. Mino then asks Shoyuta to call her darling and act like her grandfather, so she can feel what it's like when her grandmother hears that. Shoyuta does his best imitation of an old man and asks, "Darling, is dinner ready?" Mino finds it funny and joins in, imitating her grandmother. They both laugh together. Mino then comments that her grandparents sometimes call each other by their first names, and she likes it. Shoyuta blushes and calls her Mino, making her embarrassed too. They both agree it's time to sleep. Meanwhile, Shu talks in his sleep, saying he wants to go to the bath with it. Even while resting, he keeps thinking about silly things. He's drunk on sake and too tired to get up, even though he had been bothering them all day about going to the bath. And feels silly for waiting all day, but she doesn't wake him. Suddenly, the couple is in the long-awaited bath. Shu looks like a child at an amusement park, excited to be with it. Just as he's about to touch her, he accidentally slips and falls. The next day, and tries to wake Shu because they plan to go to the beach. She complains that it would be strange for him to go in his old form. Shu explains that in his dream, his wife's chest was made of hard glass, so he accidentally spun it. They head to the beach with their granddaughter, who admires A's beauty, drawing attention from everyone on the beach. Someone behind and also notices Shu's defined, muscular body despite his age. The men on the beach realize they can't even approach the white-haired lady. Shu calls Shoyuta to race him to a lookout point 3 kilometers away in the water, teasing him that if he loses to an old man, he won't be able to be with his granddaughter. Meanwhile, the girls stay in the shade, and reflects on how much her granddaughter has grown. Everyone at the beach watches the old man swimming like a flying fish in the sea, with Shoyuta giving it his all beside him. After winning the race, Shu teases the young man, saying he still has a long way to go. Later, Shu regrets seeing and missed the chance to swim after buying her a swimsuit, and says she loves staying in the shade and doesn't feel comfortable in a bikini since she's still an 80-year-old at heart. Despite Shu's attempt to convince her that she still looks beautiful, and says he's reaping what he sowed because he'd gotten her used to staying in the shade during beach trips. But just being with him and their granddaughter makes her happier than anything. And then rinses her legs in the shower, thinking about whether she could feel comfortable in public in a bikini. When she returns to Shu, he begs her to take off her top, saying it's different seeing her in a bikini compared to when he's seen her naked before. But doesn't want other men to see her like that. Shoyuta, from a distance, quietly complains that the couple is too sweet. Later, Mino is researching the meaning of the 3 sips Shu did the day before and discovers it's a wedding tradition. She feels moved by this. At night, Mino and Shoyuta are playing ping pong when the elderly couple arrives. They spend 10 minutes disputing the first point, gathering a crowd of curious spectators. Time passes, and the match shows no sign of ending. The people watching outside wonder if it could go on forever. After the intense match, and goes to wipe her sweat in the bathtub that Shu wanted to share with her. However, Shu is still in his old form and he asks if that's a problem. And doesn't mind at all, no matter how he looks. She remembers when they were young, feeling excited. Their first topic was about their long-awaited honeymoon. And worries it would be embarrassing if they stayed old and stuck in the same situation. Shu agrees, saying it would be like two demons from hell. And also thinks about her husband touching her wrinkled skin, and the sand from the hourglass keeps falling, drop by drop. They both hope the gods will let this moment last as long as possible. The next day, the family visits a Shinto shrine near the inn, and wonders what Shu is doing looking at those plaques, but he makes up an excuse and sneaks away. Meanwhile, Mino writes her wish on a plaque, hoping to play in the national soccer tournament, and tries to hide her wish but ends up revealing she wants to do well on her exams. On the other side of the plaque, though, it says she hopes to return to Atomy with her crush. And then looks at Shu's plaque and sees that he asked for health and safety for the family, but she doesn't understand why he hides such a wish. Her intuition tells her something's wrong. Shu, meanwhile, is somewhere else in the temple, secretly wishing for something, to not turn back again. And finds another plaque from Shu where he asks to be his beloved husband in the next life. She's happy to see that they share the same wish. Near the shrine, there is a huge 2,000-year-old tree, and Mino tells everyone that it's a famous spot. Walking around it will give you extra life. The elderly couple is curious, and their granddaughter explains that walking around the tree adds a year to your life. The couple decides to walk around it 100 times, and asks Shoyuta if he's interested in doing the same. He's not worried about his health right now, but Mino tells him that the tree also grants wishes. She would love someone to walk with her, so as they walk, Shoyuta starts thinking of walking beside Mino as someone special. At that moment, their hands accidentally touch, and Shu are watching from a distance and wish for a great-grandchild. Shoyuta hesitates and doesn't hold his granddaughter's hand. At night, Shoyuta says that even if he becomes a player, he still plans to return to his hometown one day to thank the land that took care of him. He asks Mino what she plans to do after high school. She hasn't really thought about it yet. As Shoyuta falls asleep, Mino worries. He seems so mature when thinking about the future, but she's unsure about her own plans. She wonders if taking care of a farm could be a good life and feels it might symbolize her future. Mino kisses Shu's forehead while he sleeps. At dawn, Shu wakes up and asks if something's on his face because Mino is looking at him. She was just imagining what the boy would be like when he becomes a grandfather. Then, an old memory comes back to Shu. His father passed away, leaving a lot of debts that Shu had to pay. He had to sell half of their orchard, which was mortgaged, and delay their honeymoon. And calmly tells him it's beyond his control and that they'll figure it out. Despite everything, Shu promises that one day he'll take and on that honeymoon. He says he'll earn a lot of money, and they'll make that dream come true. In the end, they couldn't save enough money until their children became adults, and A's illness was never cured, but Shu kept his promise. On the way back, Anne places her hand gently on her husband's. The next day, at the library, a young man is looking for something he lost when Shiori finds and returns his library card, which was under a table. She notices he has books on rejuvenation legends. They start talking, and the boy reveals he's studying medicine and is very interested in these stories. He tells Shiori that every 100 years, elderly people in his region are said to rejuvenate, and he believes someone close to him may have experienced this. Shiori explains that she's interested in medicine partly because her father is a doctor, but also because of her grandparents. They've always put others' happiness before their own, even when they were suffering, and saved her many times. She wants the ability to save them when needed. The young man, named Satoshi Takahashi, says her grandparents would cry tears of joy if they knew this, and Shu, who's been listening, agrees. Later, when Shiori returns to her grandparents' house, they hug her like she's been rescued. Meanwhile, Mino's father, Yoshiaki, notices she's been acting strangely lately. She's been coming home late and avoiding questions. He worries that she might be involved in something bad, like a cult or a bad boy, and fears social media or something similar has taken away her innocence. However, Anne reassures him that Mino's generation is calmer than Yoshiaki thinks, and that Mino is a sweet girl. Yoshiaki admits he had a rebellious phase and apologizes, sharing that he met his wife while treating injuries from a fight. The young couple aiming for the capital returns to the orchard to ask Shu and Anne something. They're surprised that the elderly couple who used to take care of the orchard are no longer around. Shu quickly makes up a story that the elderly couple is too tired, so he and A, being relatives, are taking care of everything until they return. The young couple buys Shu's story and leaves. Shu feels relieved, but Anne wishes she could do something to ease their hearts. That night, she turns the glass of their dreams again. The next morning, the boys pass by the farm and see Shu and Anne working, which eases their worries. Later, Mino says goodbye to her grandmother and heads off to school, but Anne notices she forgot her lunchbox at home. On her way to school, Mino realizes she's missing it, It's a special lunchbox she only gets a few times a month. Determined to get it to her granddaughter, and hops on her bike, even though it'll take an hour to get to the school. Mino, feeling guilty, learns from a friend that her grandmother is riding as if in a race at school and becomes popular for her effort. Meanwhile, Shiori meets Satoshi again at the library and notices he has a slight country accent, which he apologizes for, saying he was raised by his grandmother. Shiori gets nervous around him but remembers her conversation with Mino about not having a crush. Mino had asked her about guys like Grandpa Shu, but Shiori didn't think much about it. She then asks Satoshi why he's so interested in rejuvenation, and he shows her pictures of his grandparents before and after they became younger. Shiori remembers hearing about a golden apple and an apple tree in the orchard and realizes Satoshi's grandparents, Hajime and Setsu Takahashi, went through the same process. At the table, Setsu asks if Shiori is Satoshi's girlfriend, but he explains it's not like that. Shiori shows no shock about the rejuvenation, and Satoshi's grandmother, Haun, suggests he focus on his studies instead. Satoshi shares that he's doing this research to repay his grandparents, who became his parents after his real parents divorced. This touches Shiori, and she reflects that she wants to pursue medicine for the people she loves, just like Satoshi is doing for his grandparents. The rejuvenated couple apologizes for their strange talk, but Shiori believes in what's happening and hopes for them to meet two people from her family. The two couples bond over their similar experiences. After a few beers, the men jokingly say it's time their grandchildren start thinking about marriage, which makes the kids embarrassed. Shiori wonders if she and Satoshi will be an old couple someday, and Satoshi says probably, but then realizes they've never talked about it before. Feeling awkward, Shiori tries to make excuses. Later, Setsu shares a story about how Hajime came to her rescue when she lived in a boarding house where drunk men wouldn't leave her alone. That's how they started dating. Setsu believes there's no one better than her husband. Hearing this, and says she has always dedicated his life to her, so he's definitely not second best. Setsu agrees that her husband is amazing, but insists his care for her is unmatched because he's always shared all the tasks with her. The two women decide to have a competition to see whose husband is the best. Everyone gathers for the competition, and Shiori wonders why and is taking it so seriously. She calls Matsu to be the judge, and he agrees. The first challenge is tug of war. The two men give it their all. Takahashi's win the first round. In the second round, the women prepare 2 servings of kaiki, a dish with egg and miso in a scallop shell. The men have to eat both and guess which one was made by their wife. Neither man knows, but Shu cleverly guesses both dishes are from his wife, and the Satos win this round. The third round is a math challenge, which makes Shu nervous. However, before the challenge begins, Matsu interrupts and scolds the women, explaining that comparing one's love to another's isn't a competition. Matsu says he doesn't mind losing to his wife as long as she stays by his side forever. He wants to show his love for her. Coincidentally, his wife overhears this and confesses that hearing his declaration made her fall in love with him again. With this touching moment, a tie is declared in the competition, and the 3 couples celebrate with a party that lasts until early morning. Later, Shiori asks her grandmother to teach her how to cook. They start with eggplants wrapped in shiso leaves, but Shiori refuses. She also rejects other suggestions like seasoned Z or dried fish, calling them old-fashioned food. Eventually, they settle on frying chicken. When her grandmother asks why Shiori suddenly wants to cook, Shiori says she wants to bring food to the library when she studies. Her grandmother is surprised because Shiori had always disliked fried food, but Shiori says she no longer feels that way. Over the weekend, Shiori takes the fried chicken to Satoshi, who loves it. However, she didn't actually make it herself. She took leftovers from her grandmother's cooking. The next day, the younger elderly couple watches a horror movie. Shizu thinks the special effects are good but exaggerated. When he asks Anne for her opinion, she's praying with a Japanese rosary and preparing the TV with salt, as part of a tradition to ward off evil. Later, in bed, Anne has trouble sleeping, seeing evil faces on the ceiling. She prays and lies on Shizu's chest before finally resting. The next day, Mino asks her grandparents about a small tree they were near. They explain that Takahashi gave them an apple tree seedling, but planting it is difficult. Mino remembers the conversation with Sha about her dream of having a farm and asks her grandparents for the seedling as her birthday gift. Shizu reminds her that apple trees require care and can live as long as a person. Mino promises she will take care of it, even though it will be a challenge. She believes having a tree grow with her will be beautiful. Mino has been thinking about her future and feels inspired to pursue her dreams, just like someone she admires. Feeling motivated, she calls Sha to make plans for tomorrow. The next day, Shota helps Mino plant the apple tree. She imagines it growing until they're grandparents, but she also feels lonely, thinking that one day, there might be no one left around to see it. She remembers that her grandparents planted an apple tree when they got married, and that thought makes her feel strange. Shota tells her he doesn't know what tomorrow will bring but asks her to come to the orchard when he's an adult, as long as she's not married and living somewhere else. Mino promises she'll wait for him, saying it again when Shota pretends not to understand. Shizu and A, who overhear, are moved by their conversation and decide to make red rice for dinner.